Hello and welcome back to Zenin Fanfics. Today we're starting an exciting new series. What if Deku became Vigilante Black Cat? If you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe for more content. The story we're featuring is written by Tanya first on Wattpad. You can find all the relevant links in the description, so be sure to check out the author's profile and say hello. Now, let's dive into the story. The moon hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the alleyways as Shota Aizawa, or Eraserhead, walked silently through the dark streets. His patrol had been uneventful so far, just the way he liked it. Crime had been low in this area recently, but that didn't mean he could afford to let his guard down. He was about to turn a corner when a faint, barely audible sound made him pause. It was a soft, pitiful meow. Aizawa stopped in his tracks, his sharp eyes scanning the alley. At first, he saw nothing, but then a glimmer of green reflected in the dim light. His brow furrowed as he crouched down, looking closer. There, huddled in a corner, was a small, black-furred cat with piercing green eyes. Its left paw was bent at an awkward angle, and its fur was matted with dirt. The cat limped toward him slowly, its movements unsteady but determined. He sighed, his usual stoic expression softening for a moment. "What are you doing out here, little guy?" he muttered to himself, reaching out cautiously. The cat didn't hiss or retreat. Instead, it gave him a weary glance before collapsing at his feet. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. Something wasn't right about this. Even through the grime and limping gait, the cat had a presence that felt different. He didn't dwell on it for long. His hands moved carefully as he scooped up the small animal, feeling its frail body trembling. "You're coming with me," he muttered, already changing his course toward the nearest vet clinic. At the clinic, Aizawa stood in the sterile waiting room, his arms crossed as the vet examined the cat. It had been a quiet ride, the black cat resting calmly in his lap, only occasionally stirring to shift its injured paw. The vet emerged, wiping her hands and offering a small smile. "He's lucky you found him. Looks like he got into a bad fight. The bones in his left paw were broken, and he has some cuts all over, but nothing too serious. He just needs rest." Aizawa nodded, though his attention was more on the cat's eyes, now half-lidded in exhaustion. There was something almost human about them, but he brushed the thought aside. "I'll take care of him," he said quietly, surprising even himself. The vet raised an eyebrow. "A cat?" "Just for now," he replied, not fully committing to the idea. "I'll figure it out." The vet chuckled. "He'll need a lot of attention. Cats aren't as independent as you think." Aizawa simply nodded again, lifting the cat gently into his arms once more. He glanced down at the small creature as it nestled into him. "You and I will figure it out," he muttered. Later that night, back in Aizawa's apartment, the cat, Izuku, slowly stirred. His green eyes flickered open, and for a moment, his mind was foggy, disoriented. The last thing he remembered was busting a trigger exchange between some gangs, his half-cat mutation making it difficult to blend in when he needed to. Some of the gang members had taken trigger, and he was outnumbered. And now, here he was, in a cozy, unfamiliar apartment, bandaged and resting on a blanket. His eyes darted around until they locked onto Aizawa, who was sprawled on the couch, fast asleep. Izuku's heart raced. Eraserhead. He had been adopted by Eraserhead, one of Japan's most famous pro-heroes. And Eraserhead thought he was just an ordinary cat. Izuku shifted slightly, testing his injured paw. He winced but didn't make a sound. He couldn't let his true identity be discovered, not yet. For now, he was safe, and as long as he stayed in this form, Aizawa would be none the wiser. Izuku lay curled up on the soft blanket, his injured paw tucked beneath him. He tried to relax, his eyes half closed as Aizawa moved about the apartment, getting ready for bed. But his mind raced. How long could he keep up this act? He couldn't shift back while injured like this. His quirk automatically transformed him into a cat as a preservation method when he was badly hurt. Once he healed, though, he couldn't let Mr. Aizawa find out the truth. And yet, he couldn't help but wonder, how long until Aizawa noticed that something was off? He had already seen firsthand how observant Aizawa could be. Izuku had often watched from the shadows as Aizawa, calm and collected, fed stray cats in quiet alleys during his breaks. He knew the man had a soft spot for cats, which is why Izuku had been so careful to act the part. He couldn't risk raising suspicion, especially since Aizawa seemed to have an unusual understanding of feline behavior. Izuku stretched lazily, mimicking the easy grace of a contented cat, though every movement sent a sharp throb through his injured paw. Aizawa glanced over from his position on the couch, one eyebrow raised as if assessing whether or not the cat was truly at ease. Izuku froze, then forced himself to yawn and casually lick his paw, hoping it seemed natural. Aizawa's gaze lingered for a moment before he turned back to his book. Relieved, Izuku let out a soft sigh, careful to mask it as a purr. He had to keep his guard up, especially around someone like Aizawa. He wasn't just any cat lover. Aizawa had a way of understanding cats beyond the surface. The stray cats around him seemed to trust him instinctively, and Izuku couldn't help but notice how easily they bonded with the hero. If Aizawa so much as noticed a slip in his behavior, things could unravel quickly. Days passed, and Izuku settled into a routine. He made sure to eat when Aizawa set down food, drink water at appropriate times, and occasionally rub against Aizawa's legs in a friendly gesture. All normal cat things. All things that wouldn't make Aizawa suspicious. But it wasn't always easy. One evening, as Aizawa was reading on the couch, Izuku, out of habit, stared at the pages, tracking each line. It wasn't until Aizawa looked up at him, his dark eyes narrowing, that Izuku realized his mistake. He quickly flicked his tail and turned his head, pretending to be interested in something out the window. Aizawa watched him for a moment longer, then sighed. "Weird cat," he muttered, going back to his book. Izuku's heart raced. He had to be more careful. Aizawa was sharp. Too sharp. The next day, while Aizawa was out on patrol, Izuku limped around the apartment, testing his injured paw. It was healing well, thanks to Aizawa's care, but he knew he wasn't ready to return to his vigilante work just yet. He couldn't transform back to his original form, it might still take a few more days. Still, he was grateful for the unexpected kindness from the pro-hero. Even though Aizawa had no idea he was harboring the vigilante, Black Cat, under his own roof, Izuku couldn't help but feel a sense of safety here. For the first time in years, he wasn't constantly on the move, hiding from both heroes and villains. He had a moment of peace, and he knew it wouldn't last forever. But for now, Izuku was determined to maintain the charade. He curled up on the windowsill, watching the city below with his sharp green eyes. He'd stay until he could transform back. Then he'd slip away quietly, leaving Aizawa none the wiser. Or so he hoped. Aizawa sat across from Detective Naomasa Tsukachi in a dimly lit cafe, a rare afternoon break from their usual routines. Tsukachi, as usual, was working through a thick file, his brow furrowed in concentration. Aizawa sipped his coffee in silence, waiting for Tsukachi to speak first. He had been called to this meeting for a reason. Tsukachi finally closed the file and looked up. "You've noticed it too, haven't you?" Aizawa's eyes narrowed slightly. "The vigilante? Black Cat?" The detective nodded, sliding the file across the table. "He's been off the grid for almost a week now. No sightings, no reported activity. It's like he vanished." Aizawa didn't need to open the file, he already knew the details. The vigilante had been operating in the shadows for years now, taking on small-time criminals and protecting people where the pro-heroes couldn't reach. It had been frustrating at first, especially for heroes like Aizawa, who followed the rules. But as time went on, even Aizawa had to admit that Black Cat was effective, if reckless. "He's usually consistent with his patrols," Tsukachi continued, glancing at his notes. "Active in the same areas at the same time every night. Always a step ahead of us, but never close enough to make a mistake. Until now." Aizawa set his cup down, leaning back in his chair. "You think something happened to him?" Tsukachi shrugged, his expression unreadable. "It's possible. The last time anyone saw him, he broke up a drag deal involving Trigger with some local gangs. We thought he might have gone underground to recover, but it's been too long for that. There haven't been any sightings since." Aizawa's mind drifted as Tsukachi spoke. He couldn't help but think of the small, injured cat he had picked up on patrol around the same time Black Cat had disappeared. The coincidence gnawed at him, but he quickly dismissed the thought. There was no way the two were connected. Was there? He kept his face neutral as Tsukachi continued. We've put feelers out, but nothing. It's like he's gone dark, and not in a good way. It's strange for someone like him to just disappear without a trace. Aizawa's gaze flickered down to the file. You think he's in trouble? It's possible. Or maybe he's lying low because he knows we're getting closer. Tsukachi folded his hands. The thing is, we were starting to figure out his patterns and he must have known. But instead of just changing his patrol route, he stopped altogether. That's what worries me. It's not like him. Aizawa tapped his fingers against the side of his cup. It was true, vigilantes were unpredictable, but Black Cat had been consistent. If he had stopped his activities so suddenly, it could mean one of two things. He was injured worse than anyone realized, or something more dangerous had forced him into hiding. I've been keeping an eye on the crime rates in his usual patrol zones, Tsukachi added. They've started to spike again. Small-time criminals are getting bolder, and without Black Cat around, the balance is shifting. Aizawa nodded, though his mind was still elsewhere. His thoughts kept drifting back to the Black Cat with green eyes that now lived in his apartment. It wasn't possible. He shook his head slightly, pushing the idea away. We should assume he's either injured or in hiding, Aizawa said finally. Either way, we need to be ready if he resurfaces. Later that night, after Aizawa returned home from patrol, he sat in the quiet of his apartment. The Black Cat, Izuku, was curled up on his blanket near the window, seemingly dozing. But Aizawa's eyes lingered on the cat longer than usual. He had brushed the idea off earlier, but now, in the stillness of his apartment, the thought returned with more force. The timing of Black Cat's disappearance was too perfect. The injuries reported matched the condition of the stray he had taken in. And those green eyes. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. It was ridiculous to think that a vigilante would somehow end up in his apartment, pretending to be a cat. But then again, Aizawa had seen stranger things in his line of work. Quirks had endless possibilities. Still, he needed more than a gut feeling to go on. He glanced at the cat again. Izuku was asleep, or at least he appeared to be. Aizawa's eyes narrowed slightly. You're a strange one, he muttered under his breath. He would let it slide for now. But if his suspicions continued to grow, he'd have to find out the truth. And if Black Cat really was hiding in his apartment, well, Aizawa would cross that bridge when he came to it. Meanwhile, Tsukachi continued his investigation, reaching out to his contacts in the underground. He was determined to find Black Cat, whether the vigilante wanted to be found or not. The city was growing more dangerous without him, and the longer he stayed hidden, the worse things would get. But Tsukachi couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play. Black Cat had disappeared for a reason, and it wasn't just to heal from an injury. There was more to this story, and Tsukachi was determined to uncover it. Aizawa couldn't shake the feeling. It had been gnawing at him for days now, ever since his conversation with Tsukachi about the vigilante Black Cat's disappearance. It was absurd, the kind of theory that someone like Present Mike would throw out with a smirk, one of those quirky ideas that seemed impossible until you really thought about it. But the more Aizawa watched the small black cat he had taken in, the more the idea crept into his mind. He sat on the couch, a book open in his lap, but his eyes weren't on the pages. Instead, they followed the cat's every move. Izuku, or rather Kuro, the name Aizawa had started calling Izuku cat form, was sitting in his usual spot by the window. The cat's green eyes were half-lidded, but Aizawa knew better. Those eyes were far too focused for a regular house cat. There was something strange about the way the cat carried itself. Unlike the stray cats Aizawa often fed on his patrols, this one was too well-behaved. Too deliberate in its actions. He didn't knock things over like most cats. He didn't get into trouble. And whenever Aizawa was reading, he often caught the cat glancing at the words on the page, as if it were trying to follow along. It was ridiculous, of course. Cats couldn't read. But there was something about those moments when their eyes would meet. Aizawa swore he could see a flicker of understanding in the cat's gaze, something far more intelligent than he'd expect from a regular animal. He sighed, rubbing his temple. I'm overthinking this, he muttered to himself. Izuku, sitting in his usual spot on the windowsill, stretched lazily, his long black tail curling and uncurling in the evening light. He looked perfectly normal. If Aizawa hadn't known better, he might have brushed off his suspicions entirely. But then again, it wasn't just the reading. There were other things, too, small things that nagged at Aizawa's mind. Like the fact that Kuro rarely ever meowed or begged for attention. Cats usually found some way to cause trouble, but this one didn't. He was almost too quiet, too well-behaved. And then there was the way Kuro always seemed to be watching him, not like a cat curious about its surroundings, but as if he were studying Aizawa. Waiting. Aizawa couldn't help but think back to the timing. He had found the cat on one of his night patrols, limping and injured, around the same time Black Cat had vanished. The reports of the Vigilante's last sighting described a similar injury. And then there was the color of the cat's fur, black, like the Vigilante's namesake. But the idea that a Vigilante with a mutation quirk could somehow end up in his apartment, pretending to be a regular house cat, was far-fetched, even for Aizawa. He was a practical man, grounded in reality. Vigilantes didn't just turn into cats and hide out in people's homes. Did they? One night, Aizawa decided to test his theory, without giving himself away. He sat down at the kitchen table, laptop open, and began reviewing some case files on recent Vigilante activity. He made sure to leave the screen in full view of Izuku, knowing how the cat often glanced at his work. If this really was Black Cat, then seeing something familiar might trigger a reaction. Out of the corner of his eye, Aizawa noticed Izuku shift slightly from his place on the windowsill. The cat's green eyes flickered towards the laptop screen, just for a second, before he quickly turned his head away, pretending to groom his fur. Aizawa's suspicions deepened. That wasn't normal. He closed his laptop and leaned back, staring at the cat. Izuku was now staring out the window, feigning disinterest, but Aizawa's mind was racing. "What are you hiding, huh?" Aizawa muttered to himself, though he knew the cat wouldn't answer. The more he thought about it, the more the pieces started to fall into place. The injury, the strange behavior, the way this cat seemed far too intelligent for a normal animal. And the timing, it was too perfect. It was possible. No, it was absurd. But then again, this was a world full of quirks, and Aizawa had seen quirks that could turn people into mist, create portals, or cause objects to float. Was it really that impossible for someone to be able to transform into a cat? Aizawa wasn't convinced just yet, but the thought refused to leave his mind. He couldn't rule it out entirely. Not until he had more proof. Izuku stretched again, giving a wide yawn before hopping off the windowsill and padding quietly over to Aizawa. The cat brushed against Aizawa's leg, purring softly as if to say, "I'm just a regular cat." "See?" Aizawa glanced down, raising an eyebrow. "You're not fooling me," he muttered, but there was no bite in his voice. Izuku's purring continued, and for a brief moment, Aizawa let himself relax. Maybe he was just overthinking this. Maybe it really was just a stray cat with odd habits. But as the night wore on, Aizawa couldn't shake the nagging suspicion. He'd keep watching. And if his hunch was right, well, he'd have some serious questions for his cat soon enough. Izuku lay curled up on the blanket in the corner of Aizawa's living room, his green eyes alert despite his outwardly relaxed position. He had been carefully observing Aizawa's behavior, noting the pro-hero's increasing suspicion. The little signs, Aizawa's piercing glances, his attempts to catch Izuku off guard, and the subtle way he seemed to be evaluating the cat's behavior. Izuku couldn't shake the feeling that Aizawa was getting closer to discovering his secret. He wondered if Aizawa would eventually use his quirk on him to confirm his suspicions. The idea of being caught was daunting, but what frightened Izuku more was the thought of being forced to confront his vigilante identity sooner than he was ready. For the past 3 years, his life had been a constant seesaw of patrols and battles. He had sacrificed so much in the name of justice, and now, with a rare chance to take a break, he was determined to make the most of it. He wasn't sure how long he'd be able to keep up the charade of being a house cat, but he needed this respite. It was the first time in ages he felt safe, even if it was just a temporary sanctuary. But the tension was building. Every time Aizawa would pause and look at him with those sharp eyes, Izuku felt a pang of anxiety. What if Aizawa was getting closer to the truth? What if he decided to use his quirk to find out more about the cat's odd behavior? Izuku knew that he couldn't stay hidden forever. He had planned to stay with Aizawa until he was fully healed, and then he would slip away quietly. He had no intention of staying as a house cat indefinitely. But for now, he needed to keep up the act, avoid drawing attention, and hope that Aizawa's suspicions would remain just that, suspicions. One night, after Aizawa had gone to bed, Izuku was left alone in the apartment. He wandered around, pacing restlessly. His injuries had healed enough that he could move more comfortably, but he was still trapped in this feline form. The more he thought about it, the more frustrated he became. He wanted to return to his work, to feel like he was making a difference again, but he also didn't want to risk revealing himself to Aizawa. He settled on the windowsill, watching the city lights flicker below. His thoughts drifted to his time as Black Cat, to the battles he fought, and the solitude that had accompanied his vigilante life. He had no one waiting for him at home, no family or friends to return to. His life had been consumed by his quest for justice, and now, as he sat here in a stranger's apartment, he wondered if he had made the right choice in taking this break. He knew he couldn't stay as Aizawa's cat forever, but he also knew that if he left too soon, he might end up back in the same dangerous position he had been trying to escape. Izuku's thoughts were interrupted by a soft rustling sound. He turned to see Aizawa standing in the doorway, watching him with an unreadable expression. The hero had apparently woken up and was now observing his pet. "You're restless tonight," Aizawa said quietly, his voice carrying a hint of curiosity. Izuku looked back at him, trying to appear nonchalant. He stretched and yawned, hoping it would convince Aizawa that he was just a regular cat dealing with a bit of nighttime agitation. Aizawa's gaze softened slightly, but he didn't say anything more. He turned and walked away, leaving Izuku alone once more. In the quiet of the night, as Izuku continued to watch the city, he realized he needed to come up with a plan. He couldn't stay hidden indefinitely, and he couldn't let Aizawa's suspicions get the best of him. He needed to find a way to move on, to return to his vigilante life when he was ready, without putting Aizawa in danger or revealing his secret. For now, he would keep playing the part of the house cat, but he knew he had to be prepared for whatever came next. The thought of being discovered by Aizawa was unsettling, but he was determined to face whatever challenges lay ahead, whether they came in the form of a quirk, a sudden confrontation, or his own restless conscience. Aizawa and Tsukachi met at a small diner on the edge of town, far from the prying eyes of their usual haunts. The place was quiet, the kind of spot where they could talk without interruption. Aizawa sat across from Tsukachi, his expression serious. "I'm starting to think I might be losing my mind," Aizawa said, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "I've been keeping an eye on the stray cat I took in, Kuro as I've been calling him." Tsukachi raised an eyebrow, taking a sip of his coffee. "And?" Aizawa leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I know it sounds crazy, but I'm starting to think there's more to this cat than meets the eye. The timing of his injuries, his behavior, it's all too coincidental." Tsukachi's interest was piqued. "Coincidental? How so?" Aizawa glanced around the diner, making sure they were still alone. "I found this cat around the same time Black Cat disappeared. He was limping just like the reports said Black Cat was. Since then, Kuro's been acting in ways that don't add up. He's too intelligent for a normal cat, almost like he's observing everything around him." Tsukachi looked intrigued. "Are you suggesting this cat could be Black Cat in disguise?" Aizawa sighed, frustration flickering in his eyes. "I know it sounds far-fetched, but there's something about those green eyes and the timing that makes me suspicious. I've been watching him closely and he does things that make me think he understands more than he lets on." Tsukachi nodded thoughtfully. "I can see why that would be unsettling. We don't know much about Black Cat's quirk, other than it being some form of cat mutation." Aizawa admitted, "I tried using my erasure on him when he wasn't looking, just to see if there was more to him than a simple mutation. But it didn't work. It felt invasive, and I don't want to risk damaging the trust we're starting to build." Tsukachi leaned back, considering. "That's odd. If he has a mutation quirk, it's understandable why your power wouldn't affect him. But if there's even a hint of transformation involved, your quirk should have worked. If this cat is indeed Black Cat, It's going to be tough to prove if erasure has no effect. He could be just a highly intelligent animal, like Nizu. Aizawa nodded. Exactly. I don't want to make a mistake or push too hard if there's a chance I'm wrong. But I need to figure out if my instincts are right. Understood, Tsukachi said. Let's proceed carefully. I'll have my team discreetly check the database for anyone with a cat mutation combined with transformation abilities. If we can identify his true identity, it might lend some credibility to your theory. Aizawa's gaze softened. Thank you. I appreciate your help with this. Tsukachi gave a small smile. No problem. And remember, if it turns out your theory is correct, we'll need to handle it with care. Black Cat is a valuable asset, and if he's in hiding for a reason, there might be more to the story. Aizawa nodded in agreement. I understand. I'll keep monitoring the situation. Hopefully, we'll find out more soon. As they finished their meeting, Aizawa couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking a fine line. His suspicions about Kuro being Black Cat were growing stronger, but he needed to be cautious. He would wait for more information from Tsukachi and continue to observe the cat carefully. Izuku sat on the windowsill, the city lights casting a soft glow on his sleek black fur. He'd overheard Mr. Aizawa's conversation with Tsukachi about his suspicions. Worse yet, he had felt the subtle pull of Aizawa's erasure quirk being used on him, only for his own quirk to resist it. His mind raced as he contemplated his next move. He had managed to stay hidden so far, blending into the role of a stray cat. But with Aizawa now sharing his suspicions with a detective, it was only a matter of time before things escalated. Izuku knew he couldn't afford to be complacent anymore. That night, while Aizawa slept, Izuku prowled the apartment, his senses on high alert. He knew he needed to be prepared for any eventuality. If Aizawa decided to use his quirk again once Izuku was fully healed, the outcome might be different. He had to be ready, had to have a plan in place to protect his secret. Izuku's green eyes glowed faintly in the darkness as he resolved to stay one step ahead. He couldn't let his cover be blown, not yet. First, he began by examining his surroundings. He checked every nook and cranny of the apartment to ensure there were no hidden items or surveillance equipment that could reveal his true nature. The last thing he needed was to be caught off guard by unexpected scrutiny. Next, he focused on his escape plan. Izuku knew he couldn't stay hidden forever, and he had to be ready to leave at a moment's notice. He found a small, secure spot under the couch where he had stashed a few essentials. A compact medkit, a small bag of food, and a portable device that could help him create a diversion if necessary. His injuries had healed significantly, but he wasn't completely ready to return to his old life just yet. Izuku also took some time to observe Aizawa's routines. He needed to understand the hero's daily patterns to anticipate any actions Aizawa might take if he became more suspicious. He noted when Aizawa left for work, how long he was gone, and any changes in his behavior that could indicate increased vigilance. As he watched Aizawa from his usual vantage points, Izuku noticed subtle changes in the hero's demeanor. Aizawa seemed more focused and perhaps more preoccupied than usual. It was clear that the discussion with Tsukachi had left an impression on him. Izuku's anxiety grew, but so did his resolve. He knew he needed to remain calm and collected. Panicking would only make things worse. Instead, he focused on staying under the radar, making sure not to draw any unnecessary attention. In the quiet hours of the night, Izuku had another idea. If he was going to stay hidden for a while longer, he needed to blend in as seamlessly as possible. He practiced his cat behaviors, honing his ability to mimic typical feline actions. He made sure to appear as ordinary as he could, maintaining the guise of a regular house cat. He even found small ways to reassure Aizawa. He began to show subtle signs of being a comforting presence, curling up next to the hero when he was reading or working. By doing so, he hoped to build a stronger bond and perhaps deflect some of Aizawa's growing suspicions. The next morning, Izuku watched as Aizawa prepared for his day. The hero's movements were methodical, but there was an underlying tension in his actions. Izuku could sense that Aizawa was still grappling with his suspicions, and it gave him a momentary reprieve. He had to stay vigilant and be ready for anything. If Aizawa's doubts grew stronger or if Tsukachi's investigation turned up any leads, Izuku knew he would need to act quickly. For now, he would continue his charade as a house cat, waiting for the right moment to make his next move. As Aizawa left for work, Izuku sat by the window, watching him go. It was a small comfort, knowing that he had some time to prepare. He had to stay one step ahead, keep his secret safe, and ensure that his temporary refuge remained just that, a safe haven until he was ready to return to his vigilante life. Aizawa arrived at UA High School on a crisp, clear morning, a blend of apprehension and determination settling in his chest. He had arranged a meeting with Principal Nizu to discuss his growing concerns about the cat he was fostering. Nizu's interest in Black Cat was well known, considering the vigilante had managed to avoid surveillance for 3 years, and Aizawa hoped the principal's keen insights could help make sense of the situation. As he walked through the familiar hallways of UA, a sense of unease lingered. Aizawa had always respected Nizu's intellect and strategic mind, but today was different. He was bringing a personal dilemma to the table, one that felt both unusual and complicated. When he entered Nizu's office, he was met by the sight of the principal's bright eyes peeking up from behind his desk, a look of curiosity already on his face. Nizu's reputation for piecing together the most intricate puzzles was well earned, and Aizawa hoped this case would be no exception. "Good morning, Aizawa," Nizu greeted with a welcoming smile. "To what do I owe the pleasure of your visit today?" Aizawa took a seat across from Nizu, his expression serious. "Good morning, Nizu. I need your advice on something unconventional. I've been fostering a stray cat recently, and I'm starting to think there's more to this cat than meets the eye." Nizu's ears perked up, his interest visibly piqued. "A cat, you say? That's certainly not the kind of problem you usually bring to my office. What exactly makes this feline so intriguing?" Aizawa took a moment to gather his thoughts. "It's the timing, his injuries, and his behavior. It all seems too coincidental. I found him around the same time Black Cat disappeared. Since then, he's been acting far too intelligent, almost like he's observing everything with a purpose. He doesn't behave like a typical stray." Nizu's eyes glimmered with interest. "Ah, I see. Are you suggesting that this cat might have some connection to Black Cat, the elusive vigilante who has slipped through our grasp for so long?" "Yes," Aizawa said, leaning forward. "I know it sounds far-fetched, but considering Black Cat's ability to evade pro-heroes and the police, all while maintaining a record without casualties, it's possible this cat is the vigilante in disguise. I even used my erasure on him, and it didn't work. That's why I'm here. I thought you might have some insights or advice on how to proceed." Nizu tapped his chin thoughtfully, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "That is quite the puzzle indeed. If your erasure didn't work, then it's likely we're dealing with a quirk that involves both mutation and transformation, making it resistant to your quirk. There are very few individuals with that kind of ability, especially with the level of intelligence you're describing." Aizawa nodded. "Exactly. And if he is Black Cat, I don't want to scare him off by being too direct or make a mistake that could damage whatever trust we've built. I need to approach this carefully." Nizu's smile widened slightly, the gears clearly turning in his mind. "Then perhaps it's time we put our strategic minds together, Aizawa. Let's gather more information discreetly, observe him closely, and see if we can coax this cat into revealing its true nature. If this cat truly is Black Cat, we must handle this situation with both caution and tact." Aizawa felt a sense of relief at Nizu's support. "Agreed. I'm willing to play the long game if it means uncovering the truth." "Excellent," Nizu said with a nod, his eyes twinkling with intrigue. "Let's see if we can finally catch the elusive Black Cat, one step at a time." It had been 3 weeks since Izuku had first sought refuge in Aizawa's apartment. His paw was healed, and he had regained enough strength to transform into his Nico form. He knew he had overstayed his welcome. With Aizawa's growing suspicions and Nizu's keen interest, it was only a matter of time before his secret would be exposed. The thought of returning to his vigilante life was both daunting and exhilarating. His time with Aizawa had given him a new perspective and a renewed sense of purpose. He'd spent those weeks reflecting on his actions, his goals, and the reasons he had become Black Cat in the first place. Now, the urge to return to the shadows and continue his mission of fighting crime felt stronger than ever. One evening, as Aizawa prepared for another night patrol, Izuku made his decision. He couldn't remain a house cat indefinitely, not when it risked exposing him and the work he was so dedicated to. He had to return to the streets, to the life he knew best. The moment Aizawa stepped out of the apartment, Izuku slipped away, moving with the silent grace of a seasoned vigilante. He had planned his departure meticulously, making sure to avoid any surveillance or traps that could compromise his escape. His movements were swift, each step calculated as he weaved through the city's alleys, his senses sharpened by the thrill of the night. When he reached his old hideout, a surge of nostalgia washed over him. The dimly lit space was exactly as he had left it, filled with the tools and equipment he'd used during his vigilante days. He took a deep breath as his gaze fell upon his sleek black suit, neatly maintained and waiting for him. Izuku transformed back into his vigilante form, the one that had struck fear into criminals and given hope to those in need. As he donned the suit, the familiar weight settled on his shoulders, and the mask fit perfectly over his face. A wave of adrenaline rushed through him. This was where he belonged. His mind sharpened, focused on his mission. The city needed Black Cat, now more than ever. He had always been careful to avoid unnecessary violence, to bring criminals to justice without causing lasting harm. That dedication was the hallmark of his work, and he was ready to resume it with a renewed sense of purpose. With a final glance around the hideout, Izuku steeled himself for what lay ahead. He stepped out into the cool night air, letting the shadows envelop him as he melted back into the darkness, where he was most at home. The break had given him clarity, and now, more than ever, he was determined to make a difference. Back at the apartment, Aizawa returned home from his patrol, feeling the familiar weight of exhaustion creeping in. He was hoping to find Kuro sprawled lazily on the couch, as he usually did after a long night. But the apartment was eerily quiet. A quick search confirmed his fears. Kuro was gone. Aizawa paused, his gaze sweeping over the empty space where the cat used to curl up. He narrowed his eyes, a mixture of frustration and understanding settling in. The absence of the cat wasn't just a disappearance. It was confirmation that his suspicions were more than just paranoia. "Looks like you've slipped through my fingers again, Black Cat," Aizawa muttered under his breath, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "But I'll find you, no matter how far you run." With that silent promise, Aizawa's resolve hardened. He knew the game was far from over, and the hunt for the elusive Black Cat had only just begun. As the city's night enveloped him, Izuku felt a familiar thrill. The streets pulsed with a mixture of danger and opportunity. He had missed this, being out in the field, where every shadow held a potential threat or a chance to make a difference. The cool night air carried the rich aroma of street food, mingling with the faint sounds of laughter and chatter from nearby late-night diners. Neon lights flickered overhead, casting vibrant hues on the pavement, and the distant hum of traffic provided a rhythmic backdrop to his thoughts. His senses were on high alert, attuned to the subtle sounds of the city, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, the occasional clatter of a stray can rolling down the alleyway, and the whispers of wind through the narrow streets. Izuku's first stop was a local crime hotspot where petty criminals and small-time thugs were known to operate. He had studied the area before taking his break and knew the players and their routines. As he approached, he spotted a group of thugs harassing a young shopkeeper, the glow of a flickering streetlight illuminating the scene in stark contrast to the otherwise dark alley. With a deft movement, Izuku intervened. He swooped down from a rooftop, landing silently behind the thugs. His presence startled them, and using his agility and combat skills, he disarmed and subdued the criminals with precision. He made sure to keep his actions non-lethal, focusing on incapacitating them rather than causing harm. Once the criminals were restrained, Izuku quickly disappeared into the shadows, leaving a note for the police detailing the location and a summary of what had happened. He knew that his work was far from over, the night was still young, and more areas of the city needed his attention. As the hours passed, Izuku continued his patrol, stopping various crimes and helping those in need. The familiar rush of adrenaline and the satisfaction of making a difference fueled his efforts. The distant sirens echoed through the night, a constant reminder of the
city's struggles, but they also reaffirmed his purpose. He could feel the weight of his responsibilities and the impact of his actions, reaffirming his decision to return to his vigilante life. By the early hours of the morning, Izuku had covered a significant portion of the city. He felt a sense of accomplishment and renewed purpose. He knew that his return would not go unnoticed, and he would need to be prepared for any consequences. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of respite, watching the city as the first light of dawn began to break, casting a warm glow over the skyline. Meanwhile, Aizawa returned home late that evening, exhausted from his patrol. He had tried tracking the vigilante, but found himself one step behind. He informed Tsukachi and Nizu about Kuro's disappearance, which aligned with the vigilante's reappearance. Tsukachi had brought some breakthrough information about the vigilante. Name: Izuku Midoriya. Quirk: Nico. Status: Missing/dead. Midoriya Izuku disappeared 3 years ago at age 10 following a break-in by a villain who intended to steal valuables from his house, where he was living with his single mom, Inko Midoriya. He was presumed dead at the scene when the police arrived, but he was not found after the investigation. A week later, the villain was apprehended by the police following a lead provided by an unknown person. That's when Black Cat began his vigilante gig. Aizawa's heart sank as the implications of the report washed over him. He felt a mix of anger and guilt, his mind racing with questions. If Izuku was indeed Black Cat, had he been alive all this time? What kind of pain had he endured? The thought of Izuku, a child he had come to care for, possibly living in danger tore at him. Aizawa's resolve hardened. He needed to protect him. But how could he do that without exposing him? Tsukachi, too, felt the weight of the revelation. He had spent years grappling with the loss of a child who had seemed to vanish without a trace. The possibility that Izuku was alive and had taken up the mantle of a vigilante struck him with both hope and sorrow. If he's out there, we have to find him, Tsukachi said, his voice tense with urgency. We can't let him keep putting himself at risk like this. Aizawa nodded in agreement, his mind already formulating a plan. We'll need to gather more information on Black Cat and find a way to approach him without alarming him. If he's really Izuku, we need to show him he's not alone anymore. Their shared determination solidified a new mission: to uncover the truth behind Black Cat's identity and protect a child who had once vanished from their lives, but had now reemerged in a way that neither of them could have anticipated. The stakes had never been higher, and Aizawa felt the weight of responsibility bearing down on him as they prepared to delve deeper into the mystery surrounding the vigilante. The morning light filtered through the windows of UA High School, casting soft rays across the room where Nizu and Aizawa were seated at a table. The air was thick with tension, both men aware of the implications of their discussion. Aizawa leaned forward, his brow furrowed with concern. Nizu, you can't be serious about this, Aizawa said, his voice low but firm. Izuku has been living as a vigilante for years. He's not just some student who needs help. He's been fighting against the very system we uphold. Nizu's ears perked up, his eyes gleaming with determination. That's precisely why he must be taken under my wing. Izuku possesses a unique blend of talent, potential, and experience that we cannot afford to overlook. He has the instincts of a hero, and with the right guidance, he could be a formidable force for good. Aizawa shook his head, his frustration palpable. You don't understand the risks involved. He's been living in the shadows, constantly evading capture. If we approach him the wrong way, it could push him further away or expose him to dangers he's tried to escape from. We might lose him again, or we could bring him back into the light, Nizu countered, a spark of enthusiasm igniting in his eyes. The Vigilante Reform Program is designed precisely for this purpose. We can create a safe environment where individuals like Izuku can transition from vigilante activity into structured hero training. Aizawa crossed his arms, considering Nizu's words. What exactly does this program entail? How can you guarantee his safety? Nizu leaned back, his expression serious. The program will focus on rehabilitation and training for those who have operated outside the law. We'll provide them with the necessary skills, mentorship, and, most importantly, a sense of belonging. We can assure Izuku that he can continue to fight for justice without hiding in the shadows. With the right support, he can be a part of a system that values his contributions. And what if he refuses? Aizawa challenged. What if he doesn't want to leave his life as Black Cat behind? That identity is a part of him. Then we will respect his choice, Nizu replied, his tone calm yet resolute. But I believe that once he sees the potential for a brighter future, he will consider it. We can offer him the chance to be a hero in a way that aligns with his ideals. It's not about stripping him of his identity. It's about helping him redefine it. Aizawa sighed, rubbing the back of his neck in thought. You really believe this will work? That we can convince him? Nizu nodded. I do, but we must approach him carefully. We can't rush this. He needs to feel safe and understood. If we can show him that UA is a place where he can truly belong, he may embrace the opportunity to become a student rather than a lone wolf. The weight of the conversation hung in the air, Aizawa's resolve wavering as he contemplated the possibilities. What if we fail? What if he doesn't want to be a part of this? Then we will continue to support him from the shadows until he's ready, Nizu replied, his voice filled with conviction. But we must try, for Izuku's sake and for the future of the city. Aizawa nodded slowly, the stubbornness in his heart giving way to a cautious optimism. All right, I'll back you up on this. But I'm not letting him get hurt again. We have to make this work, Nizu. For his sake. Agreed, Nizu said, a smile breaking across his face. We'll ensure that he knows he's not alone in this. Together, we can create a new path for him, a path that leads to heroism, not shadows. With a shared understanding, the two men solidified their plans, knowing that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. But for Izuku's sake, they were determined to do whatever it took to guide him back into the light. The building was a stark contrast to Aizawa's warm and orderly apartment. It was an old, dilapidated structure on the edge of the city, with broken windows and graffiti-covered walls. Despite its rundown state, it had been Izuku's sanctuary during his time as Black Cat, a place where he could regroup, plan, and rest. As Izuku entered the building, he was immediately struck by the memories it held. The dim light filtering through the cracked windows cast long shadows on the walls, and the familiar scent of dust and aged concrete filled the air. He took a deep breath, allowing himself a moment to absorb the gravity of his return. He began to assess the state of his old hideout, checking on the equipment and supplies he had left behind. Some of the tools were dusty, but they were mostly intact. As he meticulously cleaned and reorganized
his gadgets, he also took the time to make his hideout as cozy as possible. He wanted it to feel inviting, a stark contrast to the warmth of Aizawa's home. Arranging a few old cushions and clearing away some dust, Izuku focused on creating a space that felt like a refuge, allowing himself not to think too much about the comfort he had experienced with Aizawa. This was his space, and he needed it to embody his true identity as Black Cat. While working, Izuku found himself reflecting on his time with Aizawa. The brief respite had been valuable, but returning to his old life brought a mix of nostalgia and resolve. He thought about the comfort and support he had received from Aizawa and the growing bond they had developed. The contrast between Aizawa's home and his abandoned building was significant. Aizawa's place had offered safety and a semblance of normalcy, while the abandoned building represented his true identity as Black Cat. It was a reminder of his mission and the life he had chosen to lead. Izuku spent several hours reorganizing his hideout, ensuring everything was in working order. He updated his surveillance systems, checked his stock of gadgets, and reviewed his files on criminal activities in the city. His return to action meant he needed to be prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead. He also took the opportunity to update his plans and strategies. The city had changed during his break, and he needed to adapt to new threats and dynamics. He meticulously crafted new plans and set objectives for his upcoming patrols. Despite the familiarity of the abandoned building, Izuku couldn't shake off the feeling of loneliness. The building was empty, devoid of the companionship he had come to appreciate during his time with Aizawa. The solitude was a sharp reminder of the isolation that came with his vigilante lifestyle. He found solace in the knowledge that he was back where he belonged, doing what he felt was right. However, the emotional weight of being alone again lingered in the back of his mind. He had to balance his sense of duty with the reality of his solitary existence. After all he had experienced, his mother's death, the loneliness of being a vigilante, Izuku had vowed never to let another child endure the pain he had faced. He wanted to protect those who were vulnerable, ensuring that they wouldn't have to go through the same hardships. As night fell, Izuku prepared for his patrol. He donned his vigilante suit, feeling the familiar weight of the costume and the mask. The black hood with cat ears framed his face, while the mask concealed his identity. His outfit consisted of snug black leather pants and sturdy black boots, equipped with concealed knives, though his claws were sharp enough for most situations. With a staff in hand, he realized that, from a distance, he bore a striking resemblance to Aizawa, dressed in all black. The process was both invigorating and daunting. The suit, once a symbol of his fight for justice, now felt like a second skin, a reminder of the responsibility he bore. It was time to step into the night and reclaim his role as Black Cat. Stepping out into the night, he left the abandoned building behind. The city's nightscape was both familiar and changed, filled with shadows that danced in the flickering streetlights. He needed to quickly reacquaint himself with the new threats and opportunities lurking in the darkness. Izuku knew that returning to his vigilante life meant facing numerous challenges. The city's criminal underworld had evolved, and he needed to stay ahead of the curve. This night marked the beginning of a new chapter in his journey, a chapter filled with uncertainty, danger, and the pursuit of justice for others. He moved through the shadows, his senses sharp and his resolve firm. The night was his ally, and he was ready to face whatever came his way. His return to the building was a symbolic gesture, marking the transition back to his role as Black Cat, a protector determined to shield the innocent from the pain he had suffered. Izuku's return to the abandoned building was a moment of transition and reflection. It highlighted the contrast between his life with Aizawa and his true identity as Black Cat. His preparation for the future, coupled with the emotional weight of solitude and his commitment to protecting others, set the stage for his renewed vigilante activities. It was a cool, crisp night in the city. Izuku, now fully immersed in his role as Black Cat, patrolled the streets with a heightened sense of purpose. The flickering lights contrasted sharply against the dark sky, while the sounds of distant sirens and sporadic footsteps echoed through the alleyways. Each shadow seemed to hold a potential threat, and he felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. As he moved through the streets, Izuku reflected on his life since his mother's death. He had chosen the path of a vigilante to protect others, ensuring that no one else would suffer the same fate he had experienced. He didn't want to enter the fostering system. The idea of being shuffled around was unbearable. Instead, he resolved to shield vulnerable kids from the harsh realities of life, hoping to offer them a semblance of safety. Meanwhile, Aizawa was on his own patrol, a mix of determination and vigilance in his demeanor. His senses were sharp, honed by years of experience navigating the city's complex landscape. Despite the late hour, he was acutely aware of his surroundings, and something about the night felt different, more charged. As Izuku investigated a disturbance in a nearby alleyway, he noticed a familiar figure moving through the shadows. The silhouette was unmistakable. It was Aizawa. Izuku's heart skipped a beat. He had hoped to avoid an encounter with his guardian while he was back in his vigilante role, but fate had other plans. He hesitated, instinctively hiding deeper in the darkness, knowing that his return to this life would spark questions and concern. Aizawa, too, was alert. He had sensed an unfamiliar presence nearby and approached the alleyway cautiously, scanning the area for any signs of trouble. The tension in the air was palpable, and he felt a prickling at the back of his mind. Something told him he was not alone. Deciding it was better to confront the situation than to hide, Izuku stepped out from the shadows. His black suit and mask gleamed faintly under the streetlights, a reminder of his alter ego. "Aizawa," he called out, his voice muffled but clear. "I didn't expect to see you here." Aizawa's eyes widened as he recognized him. "Black Cat," he said, his voice steady but tinged with an edge of surprise and concern. "You've returned. I see you've resumed your vigilante activities." The two stood facing each other, the tension between them palpable. Izuku could sense the mix of emotions swirling within Aizawa: suspicion, concern, and an unspoken worry that struck deeper than he had anticipated. "Why?" Aizawa asked, his voice softening slightly. "Why did you leave without a word? Why return to this life?" Izuku's resolve faltered for a moment, his vulnerability showing through. "I needed a break, Aizawa. I had to step away for a while. But I couldn't stay away forever. This is who I am. I need to protect this city, even if it means doing it on my own terms." Aizawa sighed, the weight of Izuku's words hanging heavily in the air. "You understand how dangerous this is. You don't have to do this alone anymore. I guess you know my identity now." "Took you long enough," Izuku admitted, determination hardening in his gaze. "But I can't ignore what's happening around me. I want to make sure no one else has to go through what I did." Aizawa's expression shifted, a mix of frustration and concern brewing. "Izuku, you're still just a kid. You should be focusing on having a normal childhood, not playing vigilante. You deserve a chance to experience life like other children, to make friends and have fun, not to constantly look over your shoulder." Izuku's heart sank at Aizawa's words, but he steeled himself. "Aizawa, I can't just stand by while people suffer. I've seen what happens when heroes don't act, and I don't want anyone to feel helpless like I did." Aizawa took a deep breath, trying to maintain his composure. "There's a place in my home for you. It's not just about safety, it's about having a place where you can be yourself, away from the chaos. You don't have to do this alone. You can come back, go to school, and try to have a normal life." Izuku's heart swelled with gratitude and surprise. "Thank you, Aizawa. That means a lot. But right now, I need to do this on my own. I'll keep your offer in mind." Aizawa's eyes reflected a mix of understanding and sorrow. "I'll respect your decision. Just know that if you ever need a place to come back to, it's there." He hesitated for a moment before adding, "I worry about you, Izuku. I can't help it. You're more than just a vigilante to me. You're someone I care about." They shared a brief, understanding nod, the complexity of their relationship hanging in the air. With a final glance, Aizawa turned and continued his patrol, while Izuku melted back into the shadows, his mind racing. As he resumed his patrol, Izuku felt a renewed sense of purpose. Aizawa's words echoed in his mind, reminding him that he wasn't truly alone in this fight. Even as Black Cat, he had someone who cared, someone who believed in him, and that made all the difference. As Aizawa continued his patrol after the encounter with Izuku, he couldn't shake the feeling of concern mixed with guilt. He had offered Izuku a place to return to, not just out of a sense of duty but from a deep-seated worry for the young vigilante's well-being. Aizawa reflected on their past interactions and the bond they had formed. He had seen Izuku as a stray cat, someone in need of care, but over time, he had come to understand and care for him as more than just a pet. The thought of Izuku returning to his old, dangerous life stirred a profound sense of responsibility in Aizawa. He wondered if there was more he could have done to prevent this, if offering a safe haven was enough to keep Izuku from the darkness he had embraced. Despite his worry, Aizawa held onto a glimmer of hope. He hoped that Izuku would eventually consider his offer seriously. To Aizawa, the offer wasn't just about providing physical safety, it was about offering emotional support and a chance for Izuku to step away from the shadows, even if just temporarily. He believed that everyone deserved a chance to find solace and healing, especially someone as burdened as Izuku. Aizawa understood that Izuku's decision to continue as Black Cat was driven by a deep sense of purpose and an unwavering longing to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Still, he hoped that having a place to return to might offer Izuku some respite and perhaps change his perspective over time. As Aizawa walked through the city streets, his resolve solidified. He was determined to keep a close watch on Izuku, both as a hero and as someone who cared deeply about him. If Izuku ever reached out, Aizawa was ready to provide the support and understanding he needed, no questions asked. Meanwhile, Izuku returned to his abandoned building, his mind occupied with Aizawa's offer. He was surprised by the genuine warmth and concern behind Aizawa's words. The idea of having a place to return to, where he could be himself away from the constant vigilance of his vigilante life, was both comforting and foreign. Izuku appreciated Aizawa's offer deeply, recognizing it as a gesture of care and understanding. It reminded him of the connection they had built during his time as Aizawa's pet and how much Aizawa had come to mean to him. He thought of the countless nights they had spent together, and how Aizawa had always been there, a steady presence amidst the chaos. Despite the comfort the offer brought, Izuku grappled with a sense of conflict. He felt a strong sense of duty to continue his work as Black Cat, and the idea of returning to a safe place felt like a step away from the mission he had dedicated himself to. The responsibility he felt weighed heavily on his shoulders, making the thought of stepping back feel like a betrayal of his purpose. Izuku knew that returning to Aizawa's home would mean stepping back into a life that, while safe and supportive, was not aligned with his current path. He struggled with the decision, knowing that accepting the offer would come with its own set of challenges and compromises. It would mean adjusting to a new routine and expectations, and he wasn't sure if he was ready to embrace that. Ultimately, Izuku's determination to follow his path as Black Cat remained unwavering. He knew that accepting Aizawa's offer would mean altering his course and potentially abandoning the mission he had set out to complete. The thought of leaving those in danger behind made him hesitate. Izuku resolved to keep Aizawa's offer in mind and to consider it seriously when the time was right. For now, he was focused on his role as a vigilante, committed to his mission. However, Aizawa's words lingered in his mind like a beacon of hope, a reminder that he had someone who believed in him and cared for him deeply. If ever he needed a respite from his dangerous life, that support would be there, waiting for him to reach out. Aizawa returned to his apartment, a wave of exhaustion washing over him. As he sat on the edge of his bed, he couldn't shake the weight of his encounter with Izuku. The young vigilante's determination to continue his dangerous path gnawed at him. Aizawa knew he had to do more than just offer a place to stay. He needed to present Izuku with a compelling reason to leave behind the shadows. The next night, Aizawa decided to take a different approach. He had done his research on the Vigilante Reform Program and knew it had garnered interest from the Hero Public Commission. It was a new initiative designed to provide support for vigilantes willing to reintegrate into society, giving them a chance to train and work as heroes under legitimate circumstances. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Aizawa ascended to a rooftop overlooking the city. It was a secluded spot he often used for quiet reflection, but tonight, it served as a perfect meeting place for the discussion he needed to have with Izuku. He hoped the young vigilante would show up. A mix of anticipation and anxiety coursed through him. He wanted to make his case clearly, to help Izuku see that there was another way forward. Moments later, Izuku arrived, clad in his Black Cat suit but with a hint of uncertainty in his posture. Aizawa recognized the look in his eyes, a mix of determination and doubt. "Izuku," Aizawa greeted, his tone firm yet soft. "Thank you for coming." "Of course, Aizawa," Izuku replied, fidgeting slightly. "What did you want to talk about?" "I've been thinking a lot about your situation," Aizawa began, gesturing for Izuku to sit on a nearby bench. "I understand your reasons for being a vigilante, but I want you to consider the consequences of this life. It's dangerous, and you're putting yourself at risk every time you step out as Black Cat." Izuku's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. Aizawa took a deep breath, knowing he had to be direct. "There's a vigilante reform program that UA is piloting. It's designed for people like you, those who want to protect others but need a structured environment to do so safely. You could become a student of UA under Principal Nise's guidance. He has a unique perspective on potential and would support you in developing your abilities further." Izuku's eyes widened, surprise evident on his face. "Aizawa, let me finish," Aizawa interjected, his voice steady. "If you join the program, it means you would have a teacher as your guardian. I can be that guardian for you. You wouldn't have to do this alone anymore. You could learn to channel your drive for justice into something legitimate and recognized." Izuku's heart raced at the idea. It was a tempting offer, but a wave of doubt washed over him. "But what about my work as Black Cat? I can't just abandon that. There are still people who need protecting." Aizawa nodded, understanding the internal struggle. "I'm not asking you to abandon your longing to protect others. I'm asking you to find a better way to do it, one that keeps you safe and allows you to grow into the hero you want to be. You can still help those in need while being part of a system that supports you. Izuku hesitated, grappling with the conflict between his current life and the potential future Aizawa was offering. But what if I'm not good enough? What if I fail? Aizawa leaned forward, his eyes intense yet reassuring. You're more than good enough, Izuku. You've already proven that with your courage and determination. UA is about growth, not perfection. You would have the opportunity to learn, to make mistakes, and to improve. And you wouldn't have to do it alone. Aizawa's words hung in the air, filling the space between them with possibility. The notion of having a supportive structure, of being more than just a vigilante, ignited a flicker of hope within Izuku. He thought about the countless nights he had spent alone, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Think about it, Izuku, Aizawa continued, softening his tone. You have a chance to be part of something bigger. Niza believes in second chances and seeing potential where others see none. You could become a part of that vision. As Izuku stood silently, contemplating Aizawa's offer, the thought of being part of UA sparked a warmth in his chest. It was an opportunity to shape his future and protect others more effectively. Yet, the fear of letting go of the life he had built as Black Cat held him back. I'll think about it, Izuku finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. Aizawa nodded, a sense of relief washing over him. That's all I ask. Just remember, you have options. If you need support, I'm here for you, no questions asked. With a final nod, Aizawa turned and began to walk away, leaving Izuku alone with his thoughts. The weight of Aizawa's words lingered, echoing in his mind as he considered the potential for a new path. After accepting Niza's proposal, Izuku, now officially part of the Vigilante reform program, decided to return to Aizawa's home. This choice was driven by both practicality and the emotional support that Aizawa's place represented. Izuku settled back into the apartment, feeling a sense of familiarity and comfort. The transition from his abandoned building to Aizawa's well-kept home was significant, both in terms of physical space and emotional support. Aizawa's apartment felt like a sanctuary where he could finally lay down his burdens, even if just for a while. One evening, after finishing his teaching job at UA, Aizawa returned home, tired but content from a productive day. As he opened the door, he was greeted by an unexpected sight, a black cat with striking green eyes lounging comfortably in his living room. Aizawa's expression shifted from surprise to a mixture of amusement and resignation. He had anticipated Izuku's return, but seeing him in his cat form, with an air of casual depth, was a new experience. As Aizawa stepped inside, the black cat looked up at him with a nonchalant demeanor. The cat's gaze was sharp and intelligent, and there was something unmistakably familiar about those green eyes. "Welcome home," the cat meowed, its voice carrying an air of authority. "I'm your problem cat now." Aizawa raised an eyebrow, a faint smile playing on his lips. "I see you've taken up residence. Did you enjoy your time away?" The cat's eyes glinted with mischief and a hint of relief. "You could say that. But I'm back now, and I'm ready for the next chapter." As the days passed and Izuku adjusted to life back at Aizawa's apartment, the bond between them deepened. The black cat with green eyes had become a constant presence, whether lounging in the living room or accompanying Aizawa on his patrols. Aizawa, despite his initial concerns and reservations, found himself growing more attached to Izuku. The cat's quirks and intelligence were endearing, and Aizawa appreciated the comfort and companionship he brought. The dynamic between them evolved into something more meaningful than he had anticipated. One evening, as they sat together in the apartment, Aizawa looked at Izuku with a thoughtful expression. The black cat sprawled comfortably on the couch, his eyes glowing with a mix of satisfaction and mischief. "Izuku," Aizawa began, his voice calm but carrying an undertone of seriousness. "You've settled in well, and it's clear that you're not just a stray cat anymore. You're my problem cat in every sense of the word." Izuku's ears perked up, and he tilted his head with a curious glance. "And what does that mean exactly?" Aizawa took a deep breath, his gaze softening. "It means that whether you're in cat form or human form, you're a part of this home. You've proven that you're more than just a temporary companion. You've become someone I care about deeply." Aizawa continued, his tone firm but gentle. So, if you're willing, I'd like to make it official. I want to adopt you, not just as a cat, but as a person who has become an important part of my life. You're my problem cat, and I'm committed to being here for you, no matter what. Izuku's eyes widened, a mix of surprise and warmth filling them. He had hoped for acceptance and support, but hearing Aizawa's words brought a profound sense of belonging. Izuku, in his cat form, looked up at Aizawa with a mixture of gratitude and affection. Thank you, Aizawa. That means more to me than you know. I'm grateful for this chance to be part of your life, both as Black Cat and as Izuku. Aizawa smiled, reaching out to gently pet Izuku. You're always welcome here, no matter how you choose to show up. This is your home now. From that day on, Aizawa and Izuku shared their lives in a new, meaningful way. The apartment became a place of safety and warmth where Izuku could be himself, whether as a vigilante, a black cat, or a young man striving to make a difference. Their relationship flourished, marked by mutual respect and deep care. Aizawa's home was no longer just a place of refuge, it was a home filled with understanding and companionship. Izuku embraced his new life, balancing his role as a vigilante with his responsibilities under the Vigilante Reform Program. With Aizawa by his side, he felt a renewed sense of purpose and belonging. They agreed to meet regularly on the rooftop to discuss anything that came up, solidifying their partnership as they navigated the challenges ahead. And so, the black cat with green eyes and his adoptive hero forged ahead into the future, facing the challenges of their respective roles with a sense of unity and shared resolve. Aizawa's offer had not only given Izuku a place to call home but also solidified their bond as family. Thank you for joining us on this journey through What If Cat Deku was adopted by Aizawa? We hope you found it as captivating as we did. A big thank you to Tanya First for creating such an engaging story. Don't forget to visit their profile on Wattpad for more fantastic works. The link is in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Zenin Fanfics for more intriguing explorations into fanfiction and fantasy. Your support helps us create more content like this, and we love hearing your thoughts and suggestions in the comments section. See you soon in the next video.